Hello and welcome to the Breaking Muscle podcast, the show that brings you the top minds in the fitness industry who share their knowledge and experience to help motivate and inspire you to take your training to the next level. I'm your host, Tom McCormick, and today I'm joined by Dr. John Rusin. John is one of the fitness and sports performance industry's leading experts in the pain-free performance training model that blends the world of strength and conditioning with clinical movement-based diagnostic medicine to provide the ultimate results-based methods. In this episode, we discuss red flags that might be holding you back, the 6 foundational movement patterns and how to develop strength in them, how to bulletproof your body, and why strength is never a weakness. So without further delay, it's on with the podcast.
So as I just said in that intro, today I am joined by John Rusin, who is one of the top guys in the fitness industry for performance, but not only performance, keeping you injury-free, building a healthy, resilient and strong body. John, thanks for taking the time to have a chat today.
Tom, I appreciate you having me on, and I am humbled that you said my last name correctly because out of the hundreds of podcasts that I've been on, I'd say it's like a 95% fail rate because they call me John Rusin, and it is Rusin. And every time I shoot a video, I always try to say Rusin. But you got it, man. So it's good to be on.
Yes. Basically, I cheated just before we got on. I Googled it and I watched the video to see you say your name, and I thought I'll try and say it like that because I have to admit I wasn't sure at first. Is it Rusin or Rusin? So anyway, fortunately, that paid off.
It did, man. Where there's a will, there's a way. I love
it. So I think, like most guys listening to this, will probably be well aware of you and what you do, but it'd be fantastic just to fill in any gaps for anyone, give them a bit of background about yourself, how you got into the industry, how long you've been in it, and how your path through the industry has sort of evolved.
Yeah, so I have been a strength and conditioning coach for 12 years now, and I started at the collegiate sector in Division I sports in America. I worked since that time in high school, college, Olympic, professional sport, in the private sector, in the public sector, and everywhere in between. And really, my go-to is pain-free performance training. So we deal with a myriad of different types of clientele, from high-performance athletes that make millions of dollars on the field on Sundays, to mothers of 4 that are just looking to lose 20 pounds, to competitive barbell sport athletes. But the one common thread that brings all of these people together under our management process is the goal of not only achieving performance, but doing it while building resiliency against pain and injuries in the process. Because over that 12 years of my career, the number one problem that I see today in the fitness and sports performance industries is that we're hurting people at record rates. We're burning people out at record rates, and people aren't able to stay active enough, stay consistent enough, work hard enough to actually achieve whatever it is their goal. So that's the problem that we're trying to fix, one client at a time.
Cool. Fantastic. And so how come that's such a passion for you? I mean, had you been injured yourself as you were doing, coming through like your youth career, like as an athlete? Where did that passion for keeping people pain-free come from?
It's funny because I actually have a doctorate in physical therapy, and I've never worked a day in my life as a traditional physical therapist. But sometimes being in school 4 years for a graduate degree program kind of rubs off on you a little bit. So, getting that education after I've actually been a high performance strength and conditioning coach, it always keeps something in the back of my mind that, hey, maybe there's a better way to do things that's a little bit different than the status quo based on the knowledge that I have of actually building the body back up. So one of the models that we try to really build into our athletes with is the reverse engineering process of kind of taking all the bad shit that people are doing that we know to be inherently dangerous or bad, taking that away and then rebuilding them back up, because a lot of our clientele, they're not beginners in fitness. They're people that have been in the game for a long time, whether it be as a group fitness instructor, whether it be as a power lifter, having been in the weight room for 20 years as a professional athlete. And over that period of time, people get into bad habits. They get into bad motor patterns, bad movement patterns, and those things need to be corrected before we can actually improve based on programming and client management.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true. And you don't want to put sort of dysfunction. If you've got dysfunctional movement, trying to load that up is not going to end well, right? So getting that early doors and addressing it makes perfect sense. So when you're working with someone and you're first assessing them or screening them, can you talk me through some of the processes you go through to make sure you've got all that information and you can work out what they need to be doing and what their level is now and how you can progress them from there?
Yeah, so my model looks a lot different today than what it looked like 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago for that matter. I tend to take the cases on today that are high profile, or they're the people that have truly fallen through the cracks. So we see, football athletes that have been out of the NFL for 2 years because of injury problems. I see competitive powerlifters that have been off the platform for 6 to 12 months due to back or shoulder injuries that nobody could get back in rehabbing. Or I see the client that has extenuating circumstances around pain or dysfunction that really nobody's been able to crack the code with. So when I actually bring in those people today, we do an entire day of an initial assessment or an evaluation. So anywhere from about 4 hours all the way up to 12 hours to get one of these things done.
Wow. Okay.
So it's a pretty big deep dive. And it hasn't always been like that, though. So when I used to work in more traditional sports performance models, traditional Olympic models, we did something very, very similar to what I hope to be a growing trend in the fitness industry today, which is having your first session with your client or athlete as a diagnostic. We want to be looking at movement as our medium in terms of diagnostics. And if you happen to be a healthcare practitioner with a license to practice and diagnose, you can throw those things in as well. But movement screening, histories, injury histories, social histories, any data that we can possibly grab on people is a starting point. But the more we do, the more our intakes become polarizing, because we also manage groups of clients and athletes together as well here in Madison, Wisconsin. And at that point in time, we try to simplify the screening and assessment process as much as we possibly can to get people to training. Because the more I see in the industry today is like we're trying to make things so complicated.
Yeah.
So I just started off by saying we might be doing a 12-hour evaluation. This is on the outlier of all outliers. For average people, you need to get in, you need to identify red flags. If they don't have any red flags, we need to get our ass to training. And that is one of the key tenets of our pain-free performance specialist certification that we've been running over the last year and a half all across the world.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I mean, in that respect, it's a needs basis. If there's someone loads of injuries and they've been out and all sorts of things, you're going to have to invest a bit more time trying to get to the root cause. Whereas people that are coming in otherwise, feeling pretty good, you don't have to invest 12 hours to let them know that they can start doing some training. But of course, you want to screen them still, and you talked about some red flags. What are the most common red flags that you're seeing, or over your career you've seen with your typical lifter comes in, and most of us guys have similar nagging injuries that we've been working around for a long time. What are you seeing most commonly?
Well, as strength coaches, as personal trainers, I always say that we are in the business of managing two of the most subjective things in the world simultaneously. Those two subjective things are pain and human movement patterns. So when you think about it like that, just training somebody through a workout is a lot harder to do at a world-class level than it is at a very low level. But when you think about that, we try to simplify the process for people when we're screening out any of the patterns: squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, locomotion, whatever it is. We have two key things that we try to identify in terms of risks. We look at spinal position, and then we look at unwanted rotary forces happening at any aspect of the body on one side as opposed to the other. When you simplify that screening process with those two key components, you'll see a lot of these patterns will have the same, what we call linchpins, which are things that no matter what you do, no matter the movement pattern or the exercise, whether you're walking or whether you're sprinting, there's going to be that weak link that shows up. That's what we're looking at. And we try to prioritize it around, again, spinal position and unwanted rotary forces happening asymmetrically on the body.
Okay. Fantastic. And so once you've identified those weak links, that obviously then feeds into your programming, your exercise selection, and how you individualize that program for that client or athlete.
Absolutely. And our first step to try to remediate, whether it be pain or dysfunction, happens in our 6 phase dynamic warm up sequence.
Okay.
So that is our preparatory phase to actually get into training. So in a matter of anywhere from 6 to 16 minutes, we have a really predictable sequence that focuses in on one single linchpin of pain and dysfunction. And we remediate that until we can move on to the second thing, to the third thing, to the fourth thing. Today, what we're dealing with is people that are coming in to work with us with shoulder pain, with knee pain, with their backs hurting, with all this different shit. And the mistake that people are making are trying to co-manage all of these different presentations at once. What we try to do is identify the one linchpin, the one thing, if we get better, it can relay a domino effect in the sequence, and we get better one thing at a time. So we can actually eradicate it from somebody's movement system, from somebody's pain response, and actually get better in the process, strengthening back up those weak links.
Yep. So prioritizing and picking that key thing is a fundamental skill to be able to do this successfully.
Absolutely. And that's the reason you need a systematic way of identifying these linchpins, because it gets complicated. People have cofactors that you have to manage during the training process. And that's going to be 95+% of people. You know, this mythical beast out there, which is the functional pain-free mover, it doesn't really exist. I've worked with maybe 2 to 3 individuals in my entire career that I'm like, wow, this guy is amazing. He's 100% pain-free. We have nothing really to work on, no red flag issues. Those people are, unfortunately, what all the content is written about in our industry, what all the books are written about, but they don't really exist in the real world. And again, that's one of the key problems that we see in academia versus real world training scenarios.
Yeah, you need to be able to have some practical takeaways, as a practitioner that apply to your clientele, not this theoretical or mythical individual that you mentioned there. Certainly, from my experience, almost everyone has some kind of issues going on, right? And it's how you manage those and how you improve those can make a huge difference to their performance. And that's the tie up, I think, that people maybe don't realize is that a lot of people put these two in separate camps. That performance are on one side of things, and then like there's the rehab therapists the other, and you're kind of crossing that divide. And it seems like more people are moving that way. Now, one thing I think is people's scope of practice. Obviously, you've got that background at studying at university to allow you to do this. Do you think there's an issue with some trainers that really don't really know what they're doing, trying to overstep the bounds of their capabilities?
Oh yeah, there's a big problem. There's a fundamental ethical and moral problem in that. Again, as personal trainers or strength coaches, or more specifically, non-licensed healthcare or fitness professionals, we have no business treating or diagnosing pain. You have to hold a license in order to do that. There's a reason why there's regulations on that stuff. But that doesn't mean that trainers can't work with people in pain. It doesn't mean that trainers can't be improving upon people's pain signaling. It means that we have to use movement as our medium to get people into better positions, to get them into more sound training scenarios, and actually have a compounding effect where we can get people to their goals more efficiently because they feel better. No trainer or strength coach would have a job today if we could not train somebody that currently had pain. Again, we try to really crunch the data when we come out with content or when I write the research. And what the best case scenario, the best statistic that I could share with people is 90+% of people walking the earth today are dealing with some sort of pain or dysfunctional problem. So that's 9 out of 10 people coming in to train with you. Again, if we were having to refer every single one of these people out, we would not have a business anymore. Training would cease to exist as a profession. But what we need to make sure that we're doing is trying to coach movement being our medium in moving people forward, making them feel better, using a multimodalic-based approach of everything under the sun in terms of movement, and having that be what yields people feeling better, as opposed to using inappropriate verbiage saying, oh, you have you probably have a tight rectus femoris that's leading to nerve impingement. And no, 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 no. We're not diagnosing. We're not treating. We are trying to make movement patterns as efficient, as effective as possible. And you know what? Long term, if we do that and we add strength to those key movement patterns, that above all else is the number one thing that we can do in order to help prevent potential injuries from happening or reoccurring if they've already had those injuries.
Mm-hmm. So there's two things you've talked about, movement and strength, and I want to discuss both. But first of all, let's talk about movement and movement patterns, because I think you're on record as saying there's not mandatory exercises, but there are mandatory movement patterns. And which ones are the ones that you really believe that we should be focusing on developing and strengthening to build that resilient body that we're all striving for?
Well, it's less what I believe in, and it's more of what the human movement genome needs. So when someone is born, when a baby is born, we must go through a normalized developmental sequence to come out of the womb and in anywhere from 9 to 15 months be able to ambulate on 2 feet. So there are predictable patterns that need to occur in that year to year and a half time frame. So for us, it's going to be the squat, the hip hinge, a single leg pattern, upper body pushing, pulling, and then ultimately getting to the point where you can move your body through space via locomotion. And I do take a relative high amount of shit for these patterns because we have t-shirts and we have branding that says squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, carry. And I want to go on record. I didn't make this shit up. This is something that has been deeply rooted in my education of the normal developmental sequence for human beings on Earth. So people have to move like humans before they move like sport-specific athletes or before they try to do something that is crazy specific to their goal set. And those patterns have been detrained over our lifetime. So we see adults unable to do multiple of these movement patterns to a requisite ability. We see huge amounts of pain or dysfunction coming through these patterns that are leading us into a deactivation model of not training meaningfully. And simply put, when I bring in a new athlete or client, the first thing that I do in a training auditing process is look at their history of these patterns. Have they been training them? Have they struggled with them? Have they had a huge amount of requisite abilities with them? And more times than not, we have these red flags in terms of just the detraining of these patterns due to learned disuse, due to neglecting them over a long period of time. And sometimes the easiest thing in order to move better, to feel better, to function better, to build muscle, to build power and strength, and to become an athlete again is just by training like a human being again.
So, given with those are those core movements and they're sort of hardwired, as it were, into human beings, obviously getting stronger at them, will improve things. So it should make you more resilient to injury and improve your performance. You'd agree with that?
So foundational movement patterns, by definition, have a long-term strength requisite component to them. So the squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, and carry can all be strengthened over time. Most times a significant amount. Now, some of the verbal discrepancies that people see is foundational versus fundamental. A fundamental pattern may be rolling. It may be rotation. Mm-hmm. It may be something a little bit more isolated that happens more from a clinical perspective. But foundational patterns have a huge amount of strength abilities. What our job is to actually build them over time, not in 6 sessions, not in 6 weeks, not in 6 months, but getting stronger decade by decade. And once you get to the point where you can't get stronger, our goal is to try to get stronger and actually keep from getting weaker. Because the stronger the person, the more resilient the person. Yes. The stronger the person, the bigger muscle mass they can put on. The stronger the person, the better everything gets, from mobility to stability to performance to fat loss and everything across the board. Strength is the number one physical characteristic that all other physical characteristics depend on in order to be optimized for the long term. Mm-hmm. And that sounds like a simple premise. Hey, get stronger and everything will get better. But many people just dance around the fact that getting strong may be a little bit tougher than going to yoga lattes or just trying to self-justify a workout on a bike or on an elliptical machine. But getting stronger in these key foundational patterns, that's the goal for training, no matter what your specific goal is and your reason for actually going in to train.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And strength is never a weakness. Or what's the quote?
That's the Louis Simmons quote. Strength is never a weakness.
Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And then the other one, I think it's Dietmar Schmidtblacker, which I almost certainly ruined his name, but that strength is the mother quality. And if you improve strength, you have the capacity to improve everything else.
Exactly.
And it sounds exactly the same as what you're describing there. So with that in mind, we want to get stronger on these movements. Do you have kind of benchmarks, perhaps relative to people's body weights, for example, that you're striving for someone who's looking to reach elite levels? And following on from that, is there a ratio you look for example, between someone's squat and their single leg movement pattern? Have you got some key indicator exercises you're looking at there?
So to answer your first question, we don't have any like across the board, like, hey, you got to bench 3, you got to squat 4, you got to deadlift 5. That's kind of archaic thinking that I've seen popularized over the last 25 years or so. I can remember reading articles 2 decades ago about these strength standards. But the only problem with these strength standards is it's absolute strength. Mm-hmm. I'm more worried about relative strength, and I'm more worried about relative strength based on the individual presentation in front of us. So I don't have specific standards for our athletes. I don't have specific standards for our clients, except for one thing. Are you stronger today than you were before? Mm-hmm. If the answer is no, then our training is not effective. Yeah. If the answer is yes, we keep on moving in the right direction. Because the person that can get strongest the longest eventually becomes the strongest. And that is the goal for unlocking longevity and really the tenet of pain-free training in our entire performance model.
Yeah. Well, one of the best ways to keep getting stronger and building muscle is to avoid getting hurt, right? So you can't
Yeah.
You can't be building muscle if you're not in the gym. So that's crucial. I was just wondering also, though, for example, you find some people they're incredibly strong on a hip hinge, but their squatting pattern's really off. Do you find that if there's those imbalances, are that a concern? And if they are, do you try and focus to some extent to bias your training towards bringing up that lagging pattern? How much of the interplay between the movements is a factor?
So there is an interplay between the movements, and this is a really great question because when I look at huge discrepancies between strength capacities in any one of these 6 foundational movement patterns, what my mind automatically goes to is the ability to stabilize and actually manage rotation. So if you were to have a 7th movement pattern, it would potentially be rotation. But rotation isn't a foundational movement pattern. It's a fundamental skill. Rotation is the fundamental skill that is essentially the glue that holds all of these patterns together. It's also the plus sign that can add a pattern from the upper body to the lower body, an upper body to an upper body pattern, and actually combine these patterns to look like more gross global movements. So as soon as somebody has a discrepancy like that, that's where I go first. How are they managing rotation? And are they actually combining their different body segmentations, their different motor patterns, and their motor recruitment patterns? So that's where my mind goes first. And then secondary to that, we always look at anthropometrics in terms of somebody's abilities for long-term strength. Not everyone's going to have the same shoulder type or hip type or femur lengths or ankle complex structure. So we have to look at those things. And then from there, if we can weed out any red flags, that's the times where we really just try to, again, get as strong as possible, really starting with the weakest link, going back to that linchpin analogy that we gave. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So just going in and just doing, just glory sessions in the weight room, punching your bench press up when your bench press is already world class, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We want to maintain your world class abilities, but we want to bring up those things, like you said, the discrepancy between a squat and a deadlift, to the point where we don't have any huge discrepancies due to not only motor patterning or recruitments, but maybe just muscle mass maybe just pure power or strength output. It could be a many different things, but it's the power of individuality when we go into programming.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And we're talking about individualization there. To some extent, the exercise selection presumably is individualized, because although we're looking for these patterns, you haven't named exercises, you've named movement patterns. And I think, obviously there's a reason why you've said that, and you haven't always been saying it's got to be a back squat or a deadlift from the floor with a conventional deadlift. Would that be fair?
Yes, there are no mandatory exercises to get strong, to get powerful, to improve performance, or to lose fat. There are only the hardest thing that you can execute pristinely well. That should be everybody's goal. But my mindset's a little bit different on this, because when I go in and I train with guys like Dave Tate at Elite FTS, or some of the old school West Side guys, they've been taught their entire lives to get as strong as possible by taking the key performance indicator lift, which is the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift, and then going backwards from there. How do I get the bench stronger? I do incline bench. How do I get the incline bench stronger? I do tricep extensions. I program much differently than that. I may have the same key performance indicator lifts for a given athlete, but I'm a believer that we build in accessory work based off of human movement pattern needs, not specifically weak links in something as dogmatic as a barbell lift, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So it's a different structure, and arguably you won't get strong the fastest doing this. But getting back to your key point, the guy that can stay the healthiest is the one that has the biggest potential to put on muscle mass, to actually boost their strength lifts, and do it from a sustainability process. Nothing's worth achieving if you can't sustain it. And I believe that deep down in my heart, not only for the people that are in the general fitness population, but people that are playing professional sports or people that enjoy barbell sport competition. Because this is a lifestyle. This is the way that we train. We train to make our lives better. Somebody broken down to the point where you can't pick up your young son at home after a deadlift session, that's not making anyone's life better. It's actually deterring away from everything that you have as a human being. So anything that we do, it has to be smarter, it has to be sustainable, and it has to be something that fuels your entire lifestyle.
Brilliant. Absolutely agree. That's fantastic. Now, so people are getting the vibe of these foundational movement patterns, and we're looking to improve strength, and they're probably wondering about how they can apply this into their own training and how they structure their training. Now, I'm sure you don't have a set in stone training split that everyone must do. There's, that wouldn't make sense. But if they were thinking about building their own workout out, you've already talked about your dynamic warm-up that takes sort of between 6 and 16 minutes, exactly depending on what's involved. How does a session flow for you? If we're kind of going for the most typical client that you would be working with, say for example, we did a little mini case study on a 30-year-old guy who is looking to gain muscle. He's been training 5 or 6 years.
This is a great question, because in my line of work today, not only are we managing clients and athletes, but I have a pretty big amount of data and user base on some of our key programs. So I have a program called Functional Hypertrophy Training that released 3.5 years ago. And in the last 3.5 years, we have 20,000 data point users on this program. And I don't say that to like toot my own horn or to brag about how many people that we put through this program. I say it to the point where we use those data points in order to figure out what the masses need, what the average person does well with. And over that 3.5 year period, I've learned one intriguing thing. So we were just talking about the power of individualization. And yes, it is necessary to individualize a program to a certain extent. But what I found out in the last almost 4 years is about 80% of programming, if you go off of the foundational movement patterns, can be the same across the board for everybody. And that will go against everything that anyone's ever been told. But again, we have the data points to prove this, that if you are looking to build muscle, to get strong, and to do it with resiliency and sustainability, there is an ultimate program. There is something that could be a cookie cutter that could work for a vast majority of people. And that's something that we try to fine tune over and over and over again with our single cell programs. So it's a pretty intriguing thing. But, getting back to your question, what would this program look like? It would be training all 6 of these foundational movement patterns with one key performance indicator per pattern. So when I say a KPI, it's something that long-term you're looking to get stronger at. So KPIs for us are usually somewhere around a barbell bench press. It's going to be a squat variation of some sort, a deadlift variation of some sort, and then we're going to have a single leg variation, most likely a Bulgarian split squat or a split squat derivative. And then the final one will be a farmer's carry or a loaded carry derivation. So when you look at that, that is going to really be the key that is going to be the same in almost everyone's program. Because again, if you're a human being, you better be getting strong at these. Mm-hmm. But from an accessory standpoint, that's where you start to build in more individualization. And when you go into finishers or metabolic stress or pure hypertrophy schemes, everyone can do well with just about the same thing. So I've had a huge amount of success with anywhere from 4 to 5 day lifting splits. Mm-hmm. I know that's not for everybody. We've also seen a good amount of success with more beginner populations doing a full body 3-day split. But I would be lying to say if we didn't have the best amount of success with a upper lower 4-day-a-week split with 2 energy systems days that work on conditioning, cardio, and recovery between those big days. Mm-hmm. So those are the ones that I, again, have seen the most amount of success with, just based on the data alone.
Yeah. I mean, as that upper lower split, from my anecdotal experience with people, it delivers time after time. It really is a phenomenal way to structure things as a framework. And I think it's interesting you say about, you can get great results with a similar program for a vast majority of people because we're all humans with basically the same physiology, and we're different. We're just not that different. So it kind of makes sense. I mean, the principles of training apply to us all. The little details might change, and as you say, that might mean some slightly different accessory work. But the meat and the potatoes of the program really don't need to be that different.
Absolutely. One of my pain-free performance specialist certification lead instructors, Clifton Harsky, he says it at all the events that he teaches. He goes, "Hey guys, you're all special little snowflakes, but you're still a fucking snowflake." Yeah. And it's perfect. It's like, you guys are still human beings. You got to train like them. But I think that upper lower split is intriguing for people because as you get into the intermediate, if not the advanced stage of a training career, we can get stronger. As you get stronger, you need more recovery, not more training. And it goes against what people think. It's like, man, this dude's big, this dude's jacked, this dude's strong. He must be able to tolerate more and more and more volume, more intensity, more everything. In my experience, it's the opposite. As somebody moves into an advanced stage, their gross global strength is at such a high level that each set taxes them more and more. So we actually have to dial that back. Mm-hmm. So the people that we have using more of like a traditional conjugate split, upper, lower, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, max effort, dynamic effort, kind of the structure of my new functional power training book, that is just enough recovery in order to get back into the gym a day or two later and actually not having repercussions of being neurally driven to the point where your recovery sucks neurologically, or to the point where you just have huge amounts of DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. So I've seen that with intermediate to advanced lifters that are looking to build muscle and really boost their strength, it's all they can do to recover after 4 days a week. So I kind of laugh when I read the articles about 6-7 days a week in the gym, 2 a days a week, or 2 a days in the gym. It's like, you can only get better from a training stimulus that you can recover from. Mm-hmm. And yes, if you're getting into the advanced stages of a training career, recovery is paramount. Because you know what happens when you don't recover? You get hurt. It's really hard to get strong when you're sitting on your couch eating Doritos. It is super, super hard.
Sounds like fun,
again, going back to resiliency. It sounds like fun for like one night a week.
Yeah.
In terms of losing a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months of your training career, it sucks.
Yeah.
Because this is what we love to do. Getting that taken away, it's some of the worst days of people having to deal with that kind of stuff. It sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting what you say about as you become more advanced, not being able to handle quite so much, because basically every set is way more disruptive. So the recovery requirements from every set that you do are magnified. So that makes perfect sense. And then, and people that train 6, 7, or do 2 a days, whatever. I think the other thing is that sometimes with those articles are put out there, the point is that that's a short-term training blitz specific to a specific situation. But someone reads it and they think, oh, that's what I do 52 weeks of the year. And of course, you have to have some kind of periodization where you're manipulating volume, frequency, intensity to allow yourself to keep getting in the gym and hammering yourself and pushing hard without getting beaten up.
Some of these programs that I see, I call it the forced meathead deload. You go in and you do something stupid as shit. Like I'm going to go and squat 30 days in a row. And then you end up hurt and you have to force deload because you're so hurt you can't even go to the gym the next week. That is not what we're interested in doing. If you're going to use a deload, have it be calculated to the point that you deload before you get hurt, not forced to do it after. But I've seen some horror stories in terms of what people are doing out there, just trying to do good. They'll go to reputable sites sometimes and they'll see these fucking programs and it will literally be all they can do to make it out of the gym that day or that week or through that training block, to the point where they're just setting themselves up for disaster. Maybe it's not an acute injury one day, but chronic based stress long term. It's something that is not doing them good. More is not better. Better is better. Knowing your body is better. Customizing your movement patterns to your body is better. And that's something that we are definitely swimming upstream in the fitness industry with, because we live in the day today. You're over in England. We're in America where we're really smart about this shit. But in America here, we think that if we sweat harder, if we get our heart rates up more, if we puke in the bucket, if I can feel like I literally killed myself, that somehow is going to be linearly correlated positively with better training effects. And you know what? It doesn't work that way. Smarter training elicits an ability to train harder. It's not smarter or harder. It's both of those things together, but it has to start with smart training protocols. Mm-hmm. Because if you're going in and you're training stupid, it's just a matter of time until, again, you get your training taken away from you.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's that catchphrase that smart training is hard training, but hard training isn't necessarily smart. And I don't know who I ripped that off, but that's someone else's. But it's I think it's so true that lots of people, they're like stimulus junkies. So the goal of their workout is to mess themselves up as much as possible, and that equates to results, which is not true. But as you also point out, for it to be effective, it has to be hard. It just needs to be done in an intelligent manner, which I think a lot of people are missing out on.
I agree. People don't know what they don't know when they're after that, because mainstream media has been force-feeding this idea of the more is better mentality for a long time now. And the shiny object quick fixes, it's sexy. Don't get me wrong, it's sexy. I sit here talking about pain-free performance training, and there is nothing sexy about pain-free training. It's like the most unsexy thing in the world. But the reason that we're able to have a huge amount of success with this training model is because this unsexy thing, which is pain-free performance training, gets us to the spot where we can achieve all those goals that we're after. And in actuality, the one thing that matters most is results. Not today, not tomorrow, but long-term results, and actually teaching somebody that there's a different way to actually achieve those results.
So let's. I just want to dive in a little bit back to our upper-lower split conversation. You talking about you have a power building or power training template where you use a conjugate method. Now, is that something you're using specifically for people that are interested in improving their big three, or is the conjugate method something that you see has application to people from all walks of life with differing goals?
We call it the functional conjugate method, and this is the backbone of functional power training. And this is not a powerlifting program. This is a get strong as fuck program while staying resilient. So we have a crazy amount of diversity using this program. Of course, we're going to have the high performance athletes in college and professional sport using this. But we have people up to 78 years old with a huge amount of success on this training platform. And we have everyone in between. It is unbelievable because going back to what we were talking about before, what's the number one thing in achieving long-term success in the gym? It's getting stronger. I have not found anything that is more effective in building strength and muscle simultaneously while keeping people healthy than the functional conjugate method. And this is something that's relatively new because the book released in January. So we've only had a couple months, a couple thousand people through this. But what people are able to do on this, getting strong and using a method that goes against everything that they've been told. It goes against everything that they've read, everything that they thought they believed. It's one of the more powerful things that I've done in my career as a coach. Because if you tell, a 55-year-old mother of 4 who's going through menopause, hey, we're going to get you stronger to the point where you are going to be hitting PRs, you're not going to get hurt, and you're actually going to put on muscle mass, she's going to think you're crazy. And then you know what? 12-week block later, you actually achieve all 3 of those goals with a multimodalic-based model that makes you feel good after you train. It's like the sky is the limit. So this is one powerful, powerful training platform. I'd highly recommend it to anyone who is not a beginner. You have to be an intermediate. You have to know what you're doing in the weight room to be able to do it. But it is a game changer. And there's really not a whole lot like it in the industry today. But it's really one single program that places in all of my systems into one. So it's 120,000 words of content, 15 chapters, and it's 300 different exercises that you go through with 650 clickable videos. It's friggin' crazy. It's the ultimate resource, but I think the dense way that it's delivered is also the reason that it's getting such good results because it really left no stone unturned with it.
Yes, you're giving them the why as well as the how.
Exactly. I'm always interested in not only getting results for our clients, but I want to know what's doing it for them. I want them to realize that this method is something that they can have success with to the point where they know what they're doing. So I love when clients go, man, this has really revolutionized what I've been able to do. Now I can go and continue to do this type of training and use the key tenets of your methods. That's empowerment. And that's really the power of functional power training, the book above anything else that I've done.
So if there's someone who's thinking they want to get as jacked and strong as possible, it sounds like a pretty good plan for them, right? But they're sitting there, and so far they know they need the foundational movement patterns. They've got their KPIs, and to look to get stronger on those. They've got some accessory or supplemental work that specific to their weak links. Is there anything else going into that melting pot when you're building this program up that you're considering when you're designing this program?
Yeah, I think we're missing one big thing that we haven't touched upon yet, which is actually managing your energy systems, being able to sprinkle in very savvy conditioning, cardiovascular training, and recovery programming. Again, we can train 7 days a week. We can get people in no matter who you are and have some sort of active process happening each and every day, 365 days a year. But what we can't have is an ass-kicking workout happening 7 days a week. So I think that the last key component to that general recommendation is to have a well-rounded energy system. Be able to do intervals, be able to do cardio, be able to actually have your heart rate sustained for X amount of time and not feel like you're going to die while you do it. And be able to use these things in order to spark recovery as opposed to deter away from it.
Yes. Excellent. And so you're programming those on the 2 days, 2 days of the week, separate from your lifting?
If I had a choice, yes, they would be split. So we would use a concurrent-based model where we would really just work on all of these different disciplines at once, whether it be strength, hypertrophy, cardiovascular health, mobility, all that stuff. But there's also a way to do it where you just get a minimal effective dose of conditioning or low intensity, low impact, steady state cardio in on top of your lifting days. But what we don't want to do is have people in the gym for 2 or 3 hours really just slaving away, just trying to burn those calories, because that's not what it's about. We're trying to build long-term strength. We're trying to be a well-rounded athlete that actually manages all these different physical disciplines simultaneously. And if that sounds intimidating, it can be, because it's a complicated process. But then again, that's the reason that we have job as strength and conditioning coaches.
Exactly. Fantastic. Sounds brilliant. And so, I mean, to be honest, I think we've got a great idea of your methodologies and the thought processes behind them. And like we're eating up your time a little bit here. So I just want to move on now to a quick fire round, and then find out a little bit more about you. And then if there's anything else you think we've missed, we'll do that before giving people a bit more details about your stuff. So in terms of the quick fire round, I've got it's just an either or question based. So really simple: pizza or burger?
Burger.
Chocolate or peanut butter?
Peanut butter.
Beach holiday or city break?
Beach holiday.
If you're having a steak, is it rare or well done?
In between.
In between. Oh, yeah, I think you're the first person to even deviate from rare. And then eggs, scrambled or poached?
Scrambled.
Cool. Okay, and now can you tell us something about you that we probably don't know?
I have 2 kids. Cameron is 3 and Maddie is 9. And my wife is actually a coach as well. So she coaches predominantly youth athletes in Madison, Wisconsin, here where we live.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you got a lot on your plate then, with a couple of kids keeping you busy, as well as the business side of things.
Oh, that's for sure.
And so the next one is, if I've got a open diary, anyone, access to anyone in the world in my address book, who should I interview next?
Man, it depends. That's a tough one. I think there's a lot of intriguing people doing good things in the space of pain-free performance training, but I also think that there's some intriguing things coming up, especially with the CrossFit Games happening this summer in Madison, Wisconsin, where I live. One of the guys that I think you guys should get on the podcast is Coach Jason Brown from Box Programming.
Okay.
Jason is doing an amazing job at actually building up a lot of the key core tenets that we talked about here today and scaling it in large group in a CrossFit gym model. And he's doing really extraordinary things and really swimming up against the stream with really sound programming and training tenets. So highly recommend him.
Awesome. Right. Well, we'll put some feelers out, try and get him on the show for sure. So thanks so much for your time today, John. It's been a pleasure, and I think loads of valuable takeaway for people there. I just want you to take a little moment to let everyone know where they can find out a bit more about you, the services you offer in case they're interested in working with you. Basically let them know where they can find out more. Yeah,
well, thank you so much for having me on, Tom. I appreciate it. And people can find me over on drjohnrusin.com, drjohnrusin.com. That's where all of our articles, our programs, and all of the media is stored. And if people want to follow along on social media, the best way to do that is on Instagram at Dr. John Rusin or on Facebook at Dr. John Rusin.
Cool, fantastic. All right, make sure those were all in the show notes below this, so people can find them easily. And from me, that's all. So thanks very much again, John.
Hey, thanks so much.
That wraps up today's episode. Thank you so much for investing your time with us. We really appreciate it. If you enjoyed what you heard and took value from it, please do me a favor by heading to iTunes right now, subscribing to the show, and leaving a review. Positive reviews, like 5 stars, hint, hint, really help the ranking of the show and will help us to spread the word and keep getting top-class guests on. Make sure to follow Breaking Muscle on social media and me at Tom McCormick, that's TOMMACCORMICK on Instagram. Bye for now, and I'm looking forward to catching you on the next episode of the Breaking Muscle podcast.